Hello again, everyone. So, we're going to continue our review, kind of broad overview, preparing for the AP exam with population and migration, which should be about 12 to 17% of the score. So, the College Board course outline calls this Unit 2. And then you can see a little bit specifically what they say will be on it, population distribution, and some consequences of that, composition, dynamics, a lot on the demographic transition model, Thomas Malthus and other population theory. You can see over on this side here, aging population. And then these last three, we have migration. So let's go ahead and start with our population, and we will start with vocabulary. So let's begin with some of the key vocabulary terms from population. Carrying capacity, how many people can be supported by a place. Demography, the scientific study of population characteristics. Ecumeny, portion of the Earth's surface occupied by permanent human settlement. Arithmetic density, the number of people in a country or place divided by the country's land area. Agricultural density is the ratio of the number of farmers, specifically, to the amount of arable land. And physiological density, the number of people in a country or place divided by the country's arable or farmable area. And this excludes things like deserts and lakes. Oh, one more down here, arable land, farmable areas. So let's go ahead and start with population pyramids and look at the basic structure. So, a population pyramid displays the age and sex structure of a country or given area. And so you can see here to the left of this y-axis here, we have males. And then over here to the right is all females. If you look straight up the y-axis, you can see this is going to be age in increments of 5-year bands. So that shows you like anything down here in this area to the right, and then look, it says 0 to 4, 4 to 9. That's going to all be, female children. Look up here, this is all going to be older males. So you can kind of get the idea. Left is males, right is females, bottom is the younger, and then the top is older. So what can population pyramids show us? They can kind of just right as we view it, show us the economic development stage of a country. So the more pyramid shape or triangle shape you have, it's going to be less economically developed because the slope essentially indicates the death rate. The width of the base is related to fertility and birth rate. And as we know, less developed countries tend to have a higher rate compared to more economically developed countries. It's going to look more like rectangular. If it's one of those stage 5, which we'll get into what that means, countries, it might even start to look like an upside down triangle. So the height can indicate to us life expectancy, because remember up here is those older ages, so more older people are alive. Look over at this country B here, you don't really have as many older people. If you see a kink, that can indicate dramatic reductions in birth rate or increases in death rate. So, this could tell us something big happened. It could be famine, it could be a war. You can have kinks and things for worker populations. The US pyramid shows a kink around, after World War II, things like that. So something's going on there. And then if you just look at the area of the graph, that kind of represents total population. So overall shape can indicate whether it's more economically developed or less economically developed just by looking at it. So if we look at some examples here, this is going to be just based on the look of it, a less economically developed country. We have a lot of children. We do not have a lot of people that are older. You can see we call this the kind of like working range of people. Lower will be dependents. You can see kind of more children than they have working people as well. Look at this pyramid here, just based on first glances. Does it look like a triangle, a pyramid? Does it look more rectangular? It does look a little rectangular here. So that's going to indicate to us that this is more economically developed. And so this is a post-World War II pyramid of Germany, and it actually shows the loss of life of both males and females in the 20 to 40 age cohorts. You can see more men than women because more men went to war into direct combat roles. So, as I said, you're going to see like baby booms, busts, and echoes. Let me just kind of show you here. You can see in the United States, back in 1980, the baby boomers were age 16 to 34, and you can't really see any sort of a echo yet, but you do see the baby boom. So, baby boomers are going to start to have a lot of babies. And then over here, you can actually see an echo. So, baby boomers here, they had a lot of babies. I'm kind of that older millennial group myself. So, it's actually an echo of that boom in births. And then you can just kind of take a glance if you want to pause on this screen at all to see kind of some more specifics. Looking at this country, oil-rich country in the Middle East, many working age males migrate to here to work in the oil fields. So that's why we have this kind of extension over on the male side. Look how old this is. We have a lot of people that are kind of working age. And as we know, a lot of single males are going to be emigrating or immigrating for work opportunities. So let's continue by looking at the demographic transition model, which is related to these population pyramids. So some vocab to remember here: life expectancy, the average number of years an individual can be expected to live given current social, economic, and medical conditions. Life expectancy at birth is the average number of years a newborn infant can expect to live. Total fertility rate, sometimes referred to as TFR, the average number of children a woman will have throughout her childbearing years. Infant mortality rate, IMR, the total number of deaths in a year among infants under 1 year of age for every 1,000 people alive in a society. Crude birth rate, the total number of live births in a year for every 1,000 people alive in the society. Crude death rate, the total number of deaths in a year for every 1,000 people alive in the society. Overpopulation, a situation in which the number of people in an area exceeds the capacity of the environment to support life at a decent standard of living, related to that carrying capacity. So if we just kind of look at the demographic transition model here, this graph here shows two different things. It's kind of like two different graphs stacked on top of each other, but it's showing how the demographic transition stage relates to total population. So you can see here, stage one, we have a really high rate of births and deaths per every 1,000 people. And you can see down here, total population, not a super amount of growth. That's going to fluctuate based on famine and things like that. Stage two, now keep in mind here, this would be more of like a real triangle for a population pyramid. Over here is going to be more rectangular. Stage two, we still have a lot of births. That's this top line here, but the death rate takes this dramatic, steep decline. So we still have a lot of people being born, but because there's less people dying and less children dying, we're going to, up here, you can see this kind of explosive population growth. Now, down here in stage three, the society is continuing to develop, and the birth rate is going to come on down to meet the death rate. Down into stage four, the population overall is higher, but the growth rate has kind of stabilized because there's just not as many people being born or dying per 1,000. So, stage one, you could think of as pre industrial, high birth rates and high death rates, population growth slow, more of an agrarian society, high rates of communicable diseases. Keep in mind, no country or world region is still in stage one. Why? Because stage two, the reason why deaths decrease is partly because of like medical technology, just basic hygiene knowledge, things like that. And all of the more economically developed countries, that technology has diffused to less developed countries. So no one's in stage one. But we do have countries in stage two, considered early industrial. Like I said, a lot of births still, but death rate declines. Now, what moved many of the less economically developed countries into stage two after 1950? Like I said, the diffusion of medical advancements. Transition to stage two. Stage two partly has to do with agriculture because there's more food, so people are more nourished. You'll learn more about that in the unit on agriculture. And like I said, medical technology, just basic understanding, things like not having a, sewer line next to a water pump, things like washing your hands. If you're just working with a corpse and then your next patient is a woman giving birth, wash your hands first, things like that. Here's a little video I made for you.
Over the past 250 years, better nutrition and food production has helped increase life expectancy. This includes the mechanization of food production, such as replacing horses with tractors, improving seeds, fertilizers, and farming techniques, and transporting products more efficiently. The use of machinery meant that one person could farm more acres. As early industrial cities grew, so did the problems of large, concentrated populations. One problem was the spread of disease. Before the Industrial Revolution and in its early years, people in cities dumped human waste into streets and rivers. Then cities began to install sewer systems, protecting water supplies from contamination. Improved medical procedures have also extended life expectancy. Among these procedures was advancements in surgery, which was often deadly before antibiotics.
All right, so stage three, considered later industrial stage, birth rates come down to meet the death rate. This is known as the fertility transition. As societies become more urban, less rural, it was really useful to have a lot of children before this because in a more agrarian society, the more children you have, that's the more workers on your farm. A lot of children died young, so also that ensures you're going to have more children. So it's like children are an economic asset when it's rural, but when as urbanization happens, children become an economic liability because there's not as much space. They did work in the factories during the Industrial Revolution, but it was just more mouths to feed. So just kind of a change in that. And then also because women started to have more power over their own fertility. Finally, stage four, considered post-industrial. It's both kind of lower, and a lot of countries, kind of more economically developed countries may enter population decline. And then that's kind of that idea of stage 5. And then looking at the connection here to the population pyramids, you can kind of see what the shape would be and why based on the stage. Now, I don't want this video to be too long, so you can pause on here and read all this if you'd like to. And then finally, to finish out population, a little more on population theory and demographic patterns. Looking at our vocabulary terms here. Pronatalist policy, a government policy that supports higher birth rates. Antinatalist policy, a government policy that supports lower birth rates. Sex ratio, the number of males per 100 females in the population. So interesting thing here is to think about cause of death and health in as countries develop. Sorry, scroll through here. I want to show you this graph here. So you can see kind of if you look at the stages of demographic transition down here, the cause of death is up here. So stage 1, pestilence, famine, communicable disease. You can kind of see here receding pandemics. We're going to start to have more of the degenerative and man-made diseases here with like cardiovascular issues, obesity, things like that. And then delayed degenerative diseases is the idea of these kind of one of the ideas is antibiotic resistant bacteria, such as like super gonorrhea is an STD that can no longer be treated by antibiotics due to overuse. So that's kind of hypothetical. And then finally, I just want to talk real briefly about Thomas Malthus and Esther Boserup. So they have these kind of opposing views of population. Thomas Malthus believed that basically we were going to have a collapse at some point, that humans cannot keep up food with the growing population. And in a nutshell, he pretty much ends up being wrong. Esther Boserup, she said that basically human agency and innovation would keep up with food production. And she was correct because, especially if you look at like some of the later agricultural revolutions, as innovation and people evolved, so did the ability to produce food. So let's jump right into part 1 of migration with our vocabulary. Refugees, people who are forced to migrate from their home country and cannot return for fear of persecution because of their race, religion, nationality, membership in a social group, or political opinion. Voluntary migration, permanent movement undertaken by choice. The number one motive for voluntary migration is economic, usually a job opportunity. Forced migration, permanent movement compelled by cultural or environmental factors that include refugees, create refugees. Migration, as a general definition, a form of relocation diffusion involving a permanent move to a new location. Immigration, migration to a new location, and you can remember the I for in immigration. They're coming in. Emigration, on the other hand, has an E, so it's like exiting. Migration from a location. Again, remember E for exit. Asylum seeker, someone who has migrated to another country in hope of being recognized as a refugee. And an intervening obstacle is an environmental or cultural feature of a landscape that hinders migration. So, looking at the push and pull factors of migration, why do people move to a new country?
The reasons people migrate are usually economic, political, or environmental. Pull factors pull people to a new home and include things like better opportunities. Push factors push people away from their home and include things like war and famine.
So, kind of outlines those definitions. And then if we click on this below, we can learn a little bit more about where people move to, patterns of human migration. So, Europe, once a region people were leaving, has become a destination for migrants from around the world. Many come from former European colonies in the Middle East, South Asia, and Africa. North America, specifically the United States, between 1500 and 1700, European countries raced to colonize North America. 1945 to the present, Latin American and Asian immigrants mostly. So what is Ravenstein's laws of migration? So you have to keep in mind that this geographer created these laws in 1885. And as I said before, that's the problem with a lot of AP Human Geography models is that they're a little bit outdated. But he said most migration is over short distance. Long range migrants usually move to urban areas. Within their own country, females are more migratory than males, but males are more migratory over long distances. He said most migrants are young adults and that migration is mostly due to economic causes. So most of these are still true, but there are some differences. So let's watch this video.
Have you ever wondered about the characteristics of people who move to a new country? Let's explore Ravenstein's theory of migration and its relevance today. Ravenstein theorized that most long-distance migrants were single male young adults seeking work. Recent migration patterns in the US match this theory in some respects, but not in others. A high share of US immigrants are young adults, as Ravenstein expected. Immigrants are less likely to be elderly people or children. Only 5% of recent US immigrants are over age 65. Children under the age of 20 comprise only 21% of immigrants. Ravenstein believed that males were more likely than females to migrate long distances to other countries. This used to be true, but female immigrants to the United States began to outnumber male immigrants around 1970. In developing countries, the percentage of female immigrants has risen sharply. The number of unaccompanied minors trying to cross into the US without proper documentation has increased sharply in recent years. Nearly 90% have been males between the ages of 12 to 17. Most are pushed out of Honduras and El Salvador because of increased gang violence. Ravenstein's theory of migration may be over a century old, but it still provides valuable insights into today's migration patterns. What do you think?
And on we go to migration part 2. So vocabulary for this section. Counter-urbanization, net migration from urban to rural areas in developed countries. Urbanization, an increase in the percentage of the number of people living in urban settlements. International migration, permanent movement from one country to another. The migration transition, a change in the migration pattern in a society that results from industrialization, population growth, and other social and economic changes that also produce the demographic transition. Intra-regional migration, permanent movement within one region of a country. Internal migration, permanent movement within a particular country. Interregional migration, permanent movement from one region of a country to another. Circulation, short-term, repetitive, or cyclical movements that recur on a regular basis. And mobility, all types of movements between locations. So let's take a look at Wilbur Zelinsky's migration transition model.
Zelensky proposed that migration patterns follow stages similar to the demographic transition model. Essentially, as a country evolves economically and socially, so do its migration trends.
Cool, right? But what does each stage look like? Let's break it down.
In stage 1, think pre-industrial societies. Here, the movement is short and cyclical. Characters are migrating between seasonal hunting grounds or fishing spots.
That's a simplified life, but when we jump to stage 2, things get chaotic.
In stage 2, industrialization kicks in. You see people leaving rural areas and flooding into cities. Imagine the Great Migration into the US during the early 20th century.
Things don't stop there. In stage 3 and 4, things get even more complex.
Here, we're talking not just about rural to urban shifts, but also international migration. Countries often receive more migrants than they lose, becoming multicultural hubs.
And then there's the theoretical stage 5. No country has technically reached it yet, but Zelensky has some predictions.
In stage 5, migration would be highly controlled and population sizes relatively stable. It's a what-if scenario that has researchers pondering.
So why is all this important for AP Human Geography? This model offers a framework for analyzing migration patterns on a macro scale.
Remember, Zelensky's model links migration patterns to socioeconomic stages, providing a comprehensive view of human migration throughout history.
And our final section of migration, we'll go ahead and start with the vocabulary. All right, vocabulary for our third migration section. Remittance, transfer of money by workers to people in the country from which they emigrated. Circular migration, the temporary movement of a migrant worker between home and host countries to seek employment. Unauthorized or undocumented immigrants, a person who enters a country without the proper documents to do so. Usually it's economic reasons, seeking better employment opportunities. Guest worker programs. In the 1960s and 1970s, wealthy European countries allowed people from poorer countries to immigrate temporarily to obtain jobs. Many have remained permanently in Europe. Quotas, a law establishing a maximum limit on the number of people who can immigrate into a country. Family-based migration, migration of people to a specific location because relatives previously migrated there. Chain migration, when people move to communities where relatives or friends migrated previously. And brain drain, large-scale emigration by talented people such as scientists, researchers, doctors, and other professionals go from less economically developed countries to more economically developed countries. So that's considered a brain drain on the countries that were left because their talent and innovators are leaving and taking their talents to another country. Usually, well, always a more economically developed country. And then just one other thing to touch on, kind of how it relates to the stages of the demographic transition model. So just these two top paragraphs here I want you to look at. The countries that generate many immigrants are likely to be in stages 2 or 3 of demographic transition. So that means that in the less economically developed countries, 2 and 3, more people are leaving. And then down here, countries that are seeking immigrants are likely to be in stages 4 and 5 of the demographic transition, as low fertility in those countries means insufficient workers entering the workforce and a need for foreign laborers. So there's a need there, and you also have people wanting to come to more economically developed countries for more opportunity. So you're going to see countries with many immigrants or people leaving are going to be stage 2 and 3. Countries that have many immigrants or people coming in are going to be stages 4 and 5.